you don't need that. Okay, just a little note about our theme today, which is spectrum of choice. Now, some of the more sage members of our board are like, spectrum of choice? What choice? You know, so many of our families are struggling mightily to find anything, you know, much less something from a menu of real viable choices. And I want to make it clear, it's a cheerful title, but we are very painfully aware that the adult autism world is experiencing an acute and mounting crisis. We absolutely know that. And we have a surging population of adults with autism, which we'll hear a little bit more about from DDS. Our agencies are very stressed. They can't keep staff oftentimes because their reimbursement rates are so low. And the other issue is we're really experiencing an unprecedented type of crisis. The character of the people that are being served in the system are really it's really changing. And we haven't really modernized to keep up with the volume or really the differences and the new challenges that this population brings. So nevertheless, this is our dream. And we, as I know, as a board, we are very, very committed to choice, both in housing, in day programs, in jobs, in healthcare, in all of those domains. Now, everybody, Eric Ziegman, Executive Director of GGRC. There's 2 slides.
Thank you, everybody. And this is just something we've all been involved in lately with our colleagues. I guess just before the fire, I wanted to echo what Jill was saying about the future of your organization. As realtors often say, location, location, location. I say leadership, leadership, leadership. So it really is important. Hey, Jeff. It's really important to have a next generation of leaders. And we, of course, wish Jill incredibly well in whatever endeavors happen in the future post-retirement, although there is no retirement anymore. So I'm sure she'll be doing stuff for the community. So anyway, please step up and be a leader. Far Northern Regional Center has an incredible leader, Laura Larson, my counterpart in Far Northern, and they have been experiencing the fires in the most intense ways. It's an object lesson in communities coming together, but right now they're just in the pure crisis mode. And so if you go to Far Northern Regional Center's website, you can see places where you can plug in maybe to support them. There's a GoFundMe page that they're using to help folks relocate. They're reaching out to the other regional centers that are closest to them for places for people to live, because many individuals served have been displaced. At this point, there hasn't been any loss of life in terms of the people they serve, which is remarkable and encouraging. And yeah, you can see the devastation there in terms of what they're experiencing. So, you know, usually these things drag on, as we've learned in California, in the fires that closed Sonoma developmental centers for a while, and in Northern California. So I would encourage you to keep checking in on their website in order to be able to support them. And I see Jeffrey coming up. Are you going to come up? Are there other things you wanted to mention? Okay. Okay.
Did I put the GoFundMe link on there or not?
Oh, sorry.
Well, if you go to GoFundMe.com and just type in Far Northern Regional Center, it will pop up, right, Jeff? Yeah.
And,
that's
or their website. Their website, they have a link on their website as well, their homepage.
Yeah, so post it on Facebook. Thank you, Eric.
Good morning. I'm actually going to maximize the speaker's time, so this intro is going to be very brief. I'm with Elevare Community in Los Angeles, but I also represent a national advocacy coalition called Together for Choice, which serves with a mission of serving individuals' rights to choose where they should live and receive services. And the speakers here represent the same mission, and they have the same purpose here. So we came here to share with you a variety of models across the country to show you that, you know, there's no one size fits all, and that we should be able to really appreciate different models and to be able to meet different individuals' needs. So I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, Krista Mason from Benjamin's Hope, Holland, Michigan.
It's wonderful to be here with you this morning. I was speaking to a number of you at our table, and I'd say, I'm from Holland, Michigan, and you know what I saw? This. It's cold in Holland, so, but it's wonderful to be with you. My organization, Benjamin's Hope, I'd love to share a little background about how this came to be. My son, Ben, is the youngest of my 2 children. He's 23 years old. At this point, he's 6 feet tall and about 250 pounds. And you're nodding, yes, you've got one that size, quite profoundly impacted by autism. And I'm sure our story mirrors the story of many of you. He was typically developing as a little fellow, and around the age of 15 months, and by his 2nd birthday, had fallen off a cliff. And prior to that, he was kind of a impy little fellow. He was mischievous, and he was getting language, and very engaged in the world. And he just folded into himself. It was quite profound. But that was 1997, so we weren't talking about autism the way that we are now. So we went through evaluations, months of testing, of course. You've all done this. And it was his 2nd birthday. And it was the day that we were to find out the diagnosis. Remember that day? And I'm sitting in front of a desk, and this doctor walks in, and he's got this manila folder. And I remember thinking, this folder is going to define what life is going to become for us. So he says to me, your son has autism. And I felt in that moment, you will understand this well, I felt like this man had this giant eraser, and he erased everything I thought I knew about raising Ben and being Ben's mom and his future. And he replaced it with a word that frightened me. So that's 21 years ago now. Now, what that doctor said to me, and you've heard something similar, he said, time is your enemy. You don't have time to sit around feeling sorry for yourself. Get busy. So by 2 years, 3 months, Ben was doing 40 hours a week of ABA, sensory integration training, auditory integration training. He had prism glasses. Who did prism glasses? Anybody? They looked cute. He looked so smart in those prism glasses. So we're intensively in this intervention, and I'm saturated in the research that tells me that by 1st grade, Ben is going to be indistinguishable from his peers. Yeah. Ha ha ha. I'm banking on that. So I'm thinking, okay, we're going for it. So a couple years later, by this time we've moved to New Jersey. Educational services were remarkable there. We made the move there. I still think we're coming out of autism in a couple years. And this picture came to mind as clear as a photograph of a farmstead community where adults, men and women, would have purposeful and meaningful engagement, where they'd have rich community. It would be a place of faith and love. And so I had that picture in my head, and I thought, wow, that's a good idea for somebody else to do. We're not going to need it. Ben's coming out of autism. And but I did share the idea with my father-in-law, who was visiting. He tucked that idea away, and 5 years later, visiting again, I think my in-laws were seeing with more clarity than perhaps my husband and I that Ben wasn't coming out of autism. So we're walking downtown Ridgewood, New Jersey one night, and he says to me, Krista, where are you with developing that farm? And I said, well, I haven't started. And he said, it's time. And it was a kick in the gut. I felt angry at him because what he was doing, and many of us are there with our children, is he was forcing me to look honestly at the support that Ben would need for a lifetime. So though I felt angry, I did get busy at that point. So I'm going to take you, since I can't take you all to Michigan with me, I'm going to take you by way of a 2-minute video, and I want to show you what's happened in the last 15 years. So you feel like you've been to Holland now? We only look that way about 3 months out of the year. So this is a little example of who we serve. We talk about Ben's Hope as a live, work, play, worship model. And that started years ago as we started to conceptualize what this community would be like. We thought about what are the things that make life wonderful for all of us. It's a safe and nurturing home. It's purposeful and meaningful work. It's a community and a place of belonging. And for many of us, it's also a faith community. So we looked at how do we incorporate that into this model so that we're serving folks all around our community. A moment to talk about the spectrum. Of course, we know that spectrum is wide, wide, wide. We've got folks over here on the Aspie side, and then we've got Ben over here. Ben is at 23 still considerably challenged by behaviors. And for years, as I researched models and looked at what was available, especially for an individual who struggles with rage and aggression, my heart broke to see what happened. But I want to pause and say, many of you are parents, and you're here, you're parents who pursue information. We can do these things. I don't have any special credentials to have developed this, but I'm fairly tenacious. So I encourage you today, as you think about what your child needs, and as you grieve the absence of what might be available, maybe there's a work in this for you. So we are serving 30 men and women at Ben's Hope, about 300 people that participate in a variety of our programs, including our life enrichment program. So here's a cool thing. To give you an idea of how we approach things, I've got a fellow named Peter. I think he's in the next slide. Let's see. Okay, so Peter, I have permission to share this about Peter. Peter's the fellow in the red sweatshirt. So Peter has an incredible ability to notice when a light bulb goes out. So I can tell you if there's one light bulb out in this room, he would have told me about it if he was with me. So he's got this great ability. Peter also has quite a significant tremor. So he wanted to be part of the team that replaces light bulbs. So what we do, our facilities guy and Peter went and bought a PVC pipe just the size of a light bulb. Peter notices the light bulb. He puts the light bulb in the PVC pipe. My facilities guy, Tony, goes up the ladder, and they change that light bulb together. It's not an efficient way to do it, but it's a way that honors Peter's unique gift to do this. So in all ways, as we look at what programming in life is around Ben's Hope, we look at a person's specific, beautiful gifting, and we create a way for that to be used. So at Ben's Hope, we're looking at daily living skills, the arts, developing skills in the barn and garden. I've got 8 alpacas, 30 chickens, 2 goats, 6 bunnies, and some barn cats. So we're learning skills taking care of the animal. About half of the men and women we serve are not traditionally verbal. And so finding purposeful and meaningful work that doesn't require the ability to have discourse is important. And so that happens for them. And we're super involved in our community. We volunteer at the museum, local churches all around. So that's a picture of Ben's Hope. Question that I'm always asked is, how do people get into Ben's Hope? In Michigan, and of course our states work different, one state to the next, we are contracted as a service provider. I'm sure you're familiar with us in different ways in California as well. And a county body will determine if a person is eligible to live at Ben's Hope. So our staffing model is 24/7 wake staff. So we're not able to do a live-in shift staff or live-in staff model as many organizations are, but our staff are awake 24/7. So staff ratios range from 1-4 to 1-1. How funding works, people essentially have 3 buckets of funding. They have their SSI, which is their rent. They have a modest food subsidy that covers, I think, about 60% of our food budget. And then they have, in our state, what's called community living supports. So those are Medicaid waiver dollars that are used for direct staffing. That covers 70 to 75% of the cost of care. So organizations like mine are fundraising constantly to provide the quality of care that we're providing. We have to fundraise for that gap. And we are at this point serving all individuals who are relying on Medicaid funding. So, and for people that are profoundly challenged, there's complicated plans in place. So this is an expensive cost of care to provide services. So, the last thing that I want to talk about, when I look at Ben's Hope, I had an interesting phone call recently. I got a call from a neighboring county, and they called and said, would I come to a meeting and talk about and explain to them why are people seeking Ben's Hope in our area so much? And I think he expected to hear about, person-centered planning and, how we support individuals with severe behaviors and whatnot. But what I talked about was love. I think at the end of the day, for our children, our neurotypical children, our children on the autism spectrum, we want them to have a place where they are loved and where they are known and where their dignity is respected and they have an opportunity to be celebrated for who they are. Truly, as we think about residential options, the house is the easy part. The quality of care, the relationships, the way they're regarded as human beings is the most important thing that for our adult children creates a life that's encouraging.
I visited Benjamin's Hope twice already, and if you are anywhere near Chicago, just rent a car, drive there for a few hours, and go see Benjamin's Hope. It's such a special place. I loved meeting residents there. They're very, very special, and we just feel so honored that you're here with us today. The next speaker is Jim Whitaker from Arc of Jacksonville, and he's here to present about his Arc Jacksonville's Village, which is an independent apartment community, and a variety of housing options that Arc of Jacksonville provides.
Good morning. First of all, I'd just like to share with you a little bit about our organization. The Arc Jacksonville has been around for about 55 years, and in recent years we sort of bucked the system as far as all ARCs don't believe in the sort of community that we have opened, but we went ahead and forged ahead to do that. We provide lots and lots of different services to a whole bunch of different sorts of people. We actually serve over 500 people a day, not at the village, but we serve 500 people a day, and we have a staff of 175. So we are a large provider of services, and we consider ourselves rather cutting edge. We try to do best practices and try new things. For instance, we have a college program for people 18 to say 30 years old at the University of North Florida. It's a totally inclusive college program. And we also offer off-campus housing as well as dormitory housing, etc. But what I'd like to sort of spend some time on today is our latest project, and that is the Arc Jacksonville Village.
For half a century, the prospects for the intellectually and developmentally disabled have shown continued improvement. In education and in job training, successes have become more numerous, and the options for our clients continue to expand as they acquire the skills and confidence to move into the competitive world of work.
We're a people organization, and now we have a bright, shining star who works with us that is such a great impact on not only the employees, but the members of the chamber. I would do it 10 times over, and I wish I would have done it way sooner.
They want to do more. And for our population, for people that want to try to employ them, they feel like they can only do something small. But if you really work with them, you'd be surprised what they can really do.
But at the end of the day, when it's time to go home, there are fewer options. IDD adults typically have returned to their parents, gone to group homes, or were left to find their own way among the general public. About a decade ago, the families of the Arc Jacksonville began to ask why there weren't other choices. They wished for a place where their children could live independently with just enough support to help them get by. So we asked them to tell us what that would be like. We asked them to dream.
It's a big community, so people can learn how to go shopping, go to the movies, explore things that they would not do at home.
It's about, taking charge pretty much, you want a home that's comfortable and very suitable and safe. Being able to have that affordable rent, stability and stuff.
Welcome to my house. I have good memories in my house. I have fun watching movies in here and stuff. And I like to hang out with my friends in here.
I just think someday all our family members are going to be gone, basically. So then what are we going to do? If we don't live on our own, then how are we going to learn?
The Arc Jacksonville Village is redefining community for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, not just for Jacksonville, but as a model for the entire nation. The Village is a residential community of affordable rental homes uniquely designed to encourage personal independence while offering physical safety and support to approximately 120 residents. The Village lifestyle is about choices. Individuals will choose to live in a community of peers, but not in a structured program. They'll make shopping choices, employment choices, and social choices. They'll learn from their mistakes just like the rest of us, with only a safety net of staff support when they choose it. The community center is surrounded by individually crafted homes and walking paths. The Village is near to shopping and the University of North Florida, where some residents will audit classes in the on-campus transition program. Hospitals, neighborhoods, restaurants, businesses, public transportation, and job opportunities are all nearby. The Arc Jacksonville Village is a bold project that will allow residents to choose their own lifestyle. They'll choose to live alone or with roommates. They'll have choices of entertainment, shopping, and recreation. And they'll have opportunities for friendship and social interaction in an environment where all abilities are celebrated and all differences are without distinction.
Individuals like Sierra, they just want to be accepted. They want people to know that they have the same aspirations as anybody else.
Because of the Arc, I think my daughter will be happy, I think she will be secure, and I think she will have many other families that surround her in the village that will ensure that she is always well taken care of.
I think that's the true part of being independent. Not just being independent yourself, but you're being independent with others.
Okay, the village was sort of a dream of most families and the folks we serve. And about 10 years ago, we found out that in Jacksonville, the state of Florida actually owned 50 acres of what's considered prime property. About 6 decades ago, some family members in Jacksonville donated the property to the state. And at the time, it was all sort of country area. And the city has built up, now it's one of the best zip codes in Jacksonville. It's suburbia. And we found out that these families that gifted this to the state actually put this very cool deed restriction to it and said it had to benefit folks with IDD. And over the years, the land just sat vacant and was surrounded by everything that you'd want to be surrounded by. So we started working our legislators and the Florida Board of Trustees, etc., who oversee Florida lands, and we were able to acquire a 99-year lease, which is just like owning the property. So of the 50 acres, we received 32 acres. So we had this property, and at that time, we really didn't have the concept of the village. But what we asked families to do and the folks we serve is to sort of dream, what could we do with this property? And what sort of kept bubbling up to the surface was, wouldn't it be neat if we could create a community which would allow for total independence and access to all the things we all enjoy in community every day. So that's sort of our marching orders, if you will. So and now that we had the dream, it's like, how are you going to do this? And so anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we did it. But it's all about providing affordable housing to folks, which can be, for most of them, long-term. And we also wanted to make sure there were supports there, staff supports, for individuals to be successful. This is the lobby as you walk into the community center. This is our dining room, and we offer a dining meal 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and it's totally optional because everybody's apartment has a full kitchen and all. This is some of the recreational sorts of amenities that we have. We have swimming, we have jacuzzis, we have basketball, we have shuffleboard. We have lots and lots of recreational sorts of things to do. We built our project with affordable housing tax credits. Every state has them, and we got on the radar of our state agency and really provided them with information how underserved our population was as far as affordable housing. So they made IDD a priority and put a separate RFA out there for requests for proposals, and we applied and we were awarded tax credits. But not only did we get tax credits, we also received some government, state of Florida grants, and we had a massive capital campaign and we raised about $7 million. I'm going to just briefly show you this, the cost of the build. And of course, here in the Bay Area, you can probably double this cost. Maybe triple, I don't know. But we received in state grants or tax credits about $11 million, and then sale dollars are affordable renting dollars we also applied for. Grants, and the Arc Jacksonville put in almost $3 million to make it a nicer community as far as all the amenities. And then we also had to have startup expenses, which included furniture, vehicles, equipment, staff startup expenses to train staff. And we were able to fund a $1 million endowment. And the endowment provides a stipend to folks who may stumble. Maybe they had a job, they can't pay their rent. So we can then authorize a stipend until they get back off their feet so they don't have to exit the community door. This is a little bit about our staffing, and we're going to go into we have breakout sessions later, and if anybody wants to know more, but our staffing consists of a village director, a director of services, we have supported living coaches, we have live-in coaches, we have activities staff, we have a mental health counselor, we have a nurse on staff. We are a AmeriCorps site, so throughout our agency we have 30 AmeriCorps members, which a number of them help here at the village, and we also have VISTA members who provide more of an administrative assistance to our organization. We have an off-site program real close to the village. It's called Explore. So we have two staff that work at the Explore program. We contract out with a company to do all of our housing management. All the rents, the leases, the maintenance, etc., is handled by a professional management housing company. You can see our rents are great. We have a lot of people. We have yeah. Okay, don't forget the property is debt-free. So the rents cover the cost of maintenance and the insurances, et cetera, that we have to do. But if we have 30 units, that an individual can have a low rent if they qualify income-wise. Once the 30 units are gone, they're gone. Those are $300 a month. And that same exact unit goes for $580 if they don't have the low rent. And shared units, because some of them are two-bedroom, the rents are low, but the utilities are included with the two bedrooms, not the one bedroom. In order to get the low rent, you have to have under $16,000 in earned income or benefits combined annually. And you can live in the village as long as you have an income, again, combined income of less than $29,000. Okay, I just went a little bit fast there. About half of our population is private pay. The other half is on the med waiver. As an agency, we're the landlord. We cannot provide the med waiver services. They pick the provider from the broader community. We do provide the services to all the private pay. Private pay rates, there are two rates. It's a flat $750 a month or $1150 depending on how many supports you need. And you can see we have 97 units total and a breakdown of 1 and 2 bedroom. One thing I tell everybody, if we had to build a village again today, we would build all 1 bedroom, no 2 bedroom. There's a lot less drama. It's hard for people to get along, It's nice just to go home to your own space and then hang out when you want to hang out and not argue about who's eating my food or whatever. So anyway, a recommendation. About half our population's male, the other half is female. Again, we have private pay med waiver. Med waiver people can buy our auxiliary services, which are more recreational in nature, for $260 a month. Private pay, it comes with your fee. Out of everybody who lives there, 121 people, 79 of them now have jobs in the community. And we're placing people all the time, so that's great. We've only been open 2 years. And we offer over 75 activities per month. And we have on-site activities and off-site. We have very, very walkable. I mean, super Targets right behind us, the super Walmarts across the street. There's movie theaters, there's everything. So our residents really access community at will. There are absolutely no restrictions. We don't monitor anybody's comings and goings. We are a gated community. Everybody has their card key to exit and enter whenever they want, as well as their family members and their providers of services. You can see a list of amenities that we have, which are a whole bunch. And this is, the community is sort of designed, a lot of family input and all, and the architect made it more like a subdivision look. It looks like homes, nice homes, and each building is actually a duplex or triplex. And it could be a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or combinations of. This is a typical apartment. The 1-bedrooms are about 750 square feet, and the 2-bedrooms are about 1,100 square feet. They're all totally equipped. This is our game room. We have raised gardening and other gardening areas. We have, again, lots and lots of amenities. We try to keep people engaged. And we have found that I think the success of our community, it's not a place just to rent. It's a place where you can have a fully engaged life. We have lots of staff support, lots of options to do things, and people are very, very busy. They're not just sitting around doing nothing all day, which I think is very, very important to a successful quality life. And wanted to also share, besides the village, we also have some nice community homes. Typically, they're called group homes or whatever. But this is a sampling of some of our group homes that we have in the community. In Florida, the typical group home is 6 beds. Okay, so these 2 homes that we're showing here are 6-bed homes, and people have all their own private space and share common space and all. And Florida's been really good about providing funding for the development of quality group homes. These 2 homes are built in the last 2 years, and we were able to apply for dollars, which paid for about 60% of the actual home, and we raised funds for the other 40%. And this, I mentioned, we have a college program. So we have students who live off campus and some that live on campus. And this housing program, there's a mentor that lives with a group of 3 students. It's a 4-bedroom apartment. And the Arc Jacksonville leases these apartments right down the street from the university. And people not only attend college, they learn independent living skills. Out of the 121 people that live at the village, about 30 of them at one time attended our college program and all. Our wait list exceeds the number of people that live in the village. There's a huge, huge demand for this and interest. And I think most states are sort of feeling that and seeing the same sort of successes. And I think this is going to be just another option. And someday CMS will embrace this. I must say, we had no problem in Florida getting past heightened scrutiny, et cetera, because the nature of this is total independence. People have choices. It's not a licensed apartment complex. We have no license whatsoever. It's just like any rental community. So again, if you'd like to know more, we're going to have breakout sessions, and I'd be happy to share more. And thank you.
And also, we're going to have Q&A session in the end, so please hold your questions then. And we're also going to have breakout sessions during lunchtime as well. So if you have questions about independent apartment communities, continuum of care, Benjamin's Hope, you can find us, and we'll be able to chat more in a more close private setting. Up next is Marbridge Foundation out of, is it Casa de Amma? Sorry. The order has changed, sorry. We have Aaron Vorel from Casa de Amma down in San Juan Capistrano, California. It's an independent apartment community, and many of you might be familiar with Aaron. He hosts independent apartment symposium periodically in California and other states as well. So please come in.
So at Casa de Amma, our tagline is when you don't want to live alone, but want a life of your own. And that really summarizes what the mission and the vision of Casa is, a place where someone can come and have their own life. At Casa, we often say that we don't offer a program, we offer 42 separate programs, tailored to the person, what their interests are, what their needs are. We don't have kind of house rules, right? It's different for each person. But at the same time, in my experience, what I've found is a unintended byproduct of independence is oftentimes isolation, vulnerability, and loneliness. So at Casa, we want to provide people with the ability to create a life of their own, but at the same time not living alone. This picture shows Casa de Amma's founders, Russ and Susie Leatherby with their son in the middle. And I want to tell you a little bit about where the dream and the idea of Casa de Amma started. You see, Casa de Amma opened our doors almost 15 years ago, but that's not when the dream for Casa started. If you go back about 17 years ago, they found a lot in San Juan Capistrano and purchased it, but that's not where the dream for Casa started. In order to understand where the dream for Casa started, you really have to go back about 10 or 15 years prior to the day that they first heard that their son was diagnosed on the spectrum. After the initial shock, they started asking the questions, what are we going to do for Doug as he ages? They knew their plan for school, they knew their post-secondary program, so what are we going to do after that? And of course, the number one fear for all families is what are we going to do as we age, and we can't be there to ensure that Doug has what he needs. It was at that time that the dream for Casa de Amma began. And as Doug started high school, he was in Southern California, and his freshman year, things were not going well. He was struggling academically, and more importantly, he was struggling with friends, and the staff that were supposed to be experts to help him along this way really weren't doing their job, and the Leatherbys felt like they had no good options. It was at this time that they heard about a school on the East Coast, and they heard that Doug could go there and live and learn independent living skills, have friendships. And the idea of sending their son across the country, at first they thought, there's no way they're going to do that. But then they traveled there, they saw the school, and they thought, maybe we should do this. And it was within the first year that Doug actually started having friends for the first time. Academically, he was starting to grow and to learn. And more importantly, when they showed up, Doug was too busy to see them at times because he was too busy with his, quote, friends. They knew that they had succeeded. Part of what the school offered was a post-secondary program, which was 3 years after high school. And in the first year of this program, they all sat in a gym, probably 50 families in a large circle. And they were asked the question, let's go around and share what are your plans once your son or daughter leaves here? And every family shared their ideas, they shared their fears. And eventually it got around to Russ Leatherby. And he started to share this idea he had recently had, because you see, just recently his mother had moved into a senior assisted living, a small one. And he was sharing how he was touched by the idea that his mother had her own apartment, she had her own space, she could still go into the community and do the things she had done previously, but she also had this community within the community. She had a place to be with other people. She had staff there that could support her just in her needs, not the needs of her neighbor or the person down the hall, but could support her with what she needed. And he started to explain this idea of what if he, and his family is blessed to have a foundation, what if he were to build something sort of like that but for younger adults with developmental disabilities? And as he explained this vision, he asked the question to everyone, he said, if I were to do this, would any of you be interested? And to a person, every single hand went up in the air, and they said, yes, absolutely. Russ heard that day what he heard for many years after. Russ, if you build it, we will come. And I want to encourage any parents in here who also have a dream and wonder, is it possible? Russ, the biggest fear in the beginning was it wasn't going to work out, but the one thing that sustained him, he said, you know what, I know what I need, and I know what my family needs, I know what my son needs, and every family I meet says they need the same thing. And if I can help this happen, I know that if I build it, they will come. It was important for Russ and Susie whenever they built the building that it wasn't a place that was going to warehouse people. It wasn't going to be viewed as an institution. So there were some important aspects to the building that they wanted. This is the view from our driveway. And as you enter the building, you'll find what we call the living room. So at Casa, we often refer to Casa as a home within a home. At Casa, each resident has their own apartment. They're about 600 square feet. They have a kitchen, living room, bathroom, bedroom. They have a patio, all the things you have in your own apartment. It's designated as their own apartment. They have a lease through Social Security. But inside the building, the home within the home, are things like this: a living room, a place where residents can hang out. Every day we offer what we call a happy hour, which is a snack time to get together, visit. If you look at the tables, they're filled with picture books. Every year we do a yearbook, and then picture books of activities that we take as a community. The same types of things you'd find in your own home. Downstairs we have what we call a family room: TV, video games. Residents gather here to watch The Voice or different sports games, or just to hang out and catch up with friends after a long day. It was important to Russ and Susie that this building had a gym as well, because they knew that many residents would access the gyms, the YMCAs, and the local community. But something that's such a struggle for their son and so many of his friends was the fact that as he's aging, there were so many complications medically from not getting the right exercise and nutrition. So they wanted to have something on site that could tailor some of those and supplement some of those supports. So we have a gym on site as well. And then probably the most important piece of the building is common dining. Similar to what Jim shared, our apartments all have their own kitchen, so residents can make dinner on their own. They can go out to dinner with friends. But we do offer breakfast and dinner every single day. That's made by our chefs, and the idea there is if we can make a healthy meal from scratch, we're going to assist the residents rather than eating microwave food, eating out in the community. And then the most important piece is they can sit with their friends and staff and have meaningful interaction around a dinner table. Our backyard is kind of a two-tiered grotto type area where, again, residents hang out, enjoy. We have a small pool and a jacuzzi. Let me give you some in-depth details about Casa. So at Casa, we have 35 residents that live on site in our building. We have 7 off-site clients. This is a program we started about 5 years ago, where residents get their own condo within walking distance. We provide all the same support services for them, but then they can come into the building, access the building, and hang out for all the different things we offer. Casa de Amma does support adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities primarily. So we wouldn't be a place for someone who has a primary diagnosis of a mental health diagnosis. Casa doesn't provide one-to-one staffing, so residents need to be, quote, fairly independent. We have residents that their needs have changed after they moved in, and we have residents that could never go into the community on their own without a staff. But someone coming in our admissions profile would be someone that needs assistance but doesn't need a one-to-one staffing 24 hours. We do provide awake staff overnight 24 hours, 365 days of the week. Some of the things we do provide, so we provide oversight in wellness and medication. For many of our residents, they can't do this on their own. And the way our program's set up, we don't have a med room or anything like that, so the medications are stored in their apartment. And if they're not safe to take care of them on their own, we have a lockbox that staff can access. They give us permission, they sign a waiver for us to open that up for them, and we assist them in medical appointments. We assist them in taking the medications, every aspect of their life. Of course, apartment life, laundry, cleaning their apartment, all of those types of things. Nutrition and grocery store. So typically a resident goes grocery shopping once a week with the staff. And prior to doing that, they would do a nutrition meeting, so they'd help assist them in what do you need for groceries for this week, making sure that also if they can get a list beforehand, there's not that impulse buying that happens for so many of us at the grocery store. Each resident also typically meets with the staff to do bill paying. So we have a monthly budget that goes out to the family. The families and the residents determine how much money do I have, and we assist them to make sure that by the end of the month they haven't run out of that money, and also that they're using their money for what's on their budget. Integral to Casa's success is we also have a full-time person that does vocational support. So they're able to help them find a job, and what we found even more important is helping them keep that job once they have it. We do many other things like social skills, transportation. I want to briefly tell you 2 different days at Casa seen through the eyes of 2 of our residents. This is Chris. I met Chris about 5 years ago. And if you met him from the outside, you would think everything was going really well for him. He was living in his own apartment, and it seemed like the first 5 minutes you talked to him, things were going well. But if you dig a little deeper, he was isolated. He was vulnerable with some of his neighbors. He had a number of medical issues that had arisen because he wasn't really getting the right support and because of the isolation. And we met him because his mother was passing away from a terminal illness. And while he didn't live with her, she realized that he needed something more. Shortly after, he moved to our off-site program, so he was able to still have his own condo. And very, very quickly afterwards, his mother passed away. Both in the first year of moving into Casa, he lost 60 pounds, partly because of our meals, but more importantly, because he wasn't isolated watching TV, having a microwave meal in his apartment. He was taking part in our community. Chris's days consist of his job that ended up becoming his dream job. You see, he hadn't worked for 5 years prior, mainly because of different struggles with anxiety. But Chris loves sports. He's like an encyclopedia for sports. So our staff was able to find him a job at a private school next door that has a wonderful sports program. So now on a weekly basis, Chris helps with the volleyball team, the basketball team, and even the varsity football team. And at least 1 or 2 times a year, the coach will ask Chris to give the motivational speech for the varsity team, which we hear about for the 364 other days of the year. Probably most importantly, and if Chris were here, he would definitely say most importantly, is that when he moved into Casa a couple years after, he met the love of his life. He's become engaged. He no longer refers to her by her name. It's now my beloved, and we give him a hard time about that. But he's found meaningful relationships, whether it's romantic, with staff. And while his mother, he just recently celebrated his mother's passing a couple weeks ago. But he's told us how many times how proud she would be that he's really had the life that she always wanted for him. Robin. I met Robin about 11 years ago. And during her first tour, I sat down privately with her dad, and he told me about the program she had been attending on the East Coast and how she had been the victim of abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, by other residents, and more saddening, by staff. See, Robin's gregarious, she's very social, but she's very naive. So he was looking for a place that she could thrive, that she wouldn't just be locked down, but that there could be oversight to help her with some of these areas she struggled in. Robin moved into Casa, and very quickly her life changed. She had never worked for a paying job for minimum wage or above. She was able to get a job. She wasn't able to hold it for very long because of some other issues, and we realized she probably needed a job coach with her most of the time. So we were able to get her a job working 5 days a week with a job coach. A few years ago, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness. The Casa de Amma has been able to support her, and now she doesn't work as many days as she used to. But when she's not working and not going to doctor's appointments, she's there hanging out with her friends. Her friends are able to comfort her and support her. And she has created the life that her and her father have always dreamed of. Some information about costs and fees. So Casa de Amma's annual fee is just a little over $47,000 a year. That includes the apartment, all the supports, 2 meals a day, transportation. There's just one single fee. And then the residents typically have the following extra costs, so utilities. So because our apartments are metered separately, and that's part of the importance of having it be their own dwelling unit, they would have their own electricity bills, obviously cell phone, internet, cable TV, those types of things, all things that work with the budget process. And then weekend activities, if they go to Disneyland and movies, they pay for that, and of course, clothing and personal items. Our off-site program that I mentioned that Chris is a part of, and that runs about $28,000 a year. That includes everything a person at Casa is receiving, but the family and the individual leases the condo separately. But it's important with that program that they're not treated like second-class citizens. So whether it comes to meals, activity sign-ups, anything that we do in-house, we have an enrichment group program called Casa U. They have the same access as anyone living on-site or off-site. So Casa de Amma is not vendored with the regional center. Many of you are probably very familiar with the regional center. In the early days when the board started, there's some fear around the regional center, and I think they didn't really understand what the regional center was and wasn't. So the choice was made not to vendor. At Casa, the agreement is with the client, which would be the individual and or the family. But in 2005, a mother who wanted her son at Casa de Amma went to a fair hearing with the regional center. And they argued that Casa was the least restrictive environment, that it was going to be much better and her son would thrive more than the other options they showed her. And she pointed out, by the way, it's actually cheaper than what you want to pay to put him in one of the group homes. They won, and a precedent was set that any resident moving into Casa could be a self-vendor and then get the funding, and the funding typically starts at about 65% upwards of what our total fee is, and then it can apply that to Casa. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Our residents are able to get their funding, but we're not vendored, and we work cooperatively with the Orange County Regional Center. And then the rest of the fee would be paid privately or offset through our financial aid program that we raise money for each year. What works well at Casa? Well, I think Casa de Amma combines many aspects that are unique and are often not found in one place in traditional housing and support models. Our on-site staff team creates a culture and a relationship with the resident and the family. And I think this is the most important thing. For families, they know who they can go to. They know the people that are working with their sons and daughters. And for the residents, it's not someone random showing up, depending on who the service provider has assigned. They know the residents and the staff. And as a matter of fact, just this last Tuesday, we've done the same thing for 10 years where the residents, and this was an idea by the residents, for Thanksgiving, they cook the meal and they actually get to stand behind the line and serve the staff. And of course, a few of them always want to give us a little bit less and remind us that we need to work on our portion control. But it's a wonderful one. We cap off the night by everyone sharing things we're thankful for. Casa de Amma is what I refer to as an independent apartment community model. And what that stands for is that the program is independent. It's not a one-size-fits-all program. It's different for each person. Apartment, meaning that the apartments truly are their own. They're separate leases. They have their lease agreement. They're their own dwelling unit. And then there's this community within the community model. This idea that even though they go out into the community to work, they go out in the community to access other services, do all the things we would do, they can come home to this community feel where they have people that they know and care about around them. And then, of course, there's a wide variety of supports and needs successfully addressed. This past year, we had what I would consider one of our biggest successes in almost 15 years. And it might not sound like a success at first, but one of our residents who was diagnosed with cancer about 8 years ago, we found out that it was terminal about a year ago, and he passed away in his apartment with hospice. And why that was a success, because we never wanted to turn someone away in their time of greatest need if that's not what they wanted. And it was hard for our residents, hard for our community, but it was by far the most beautiful thing we've experienced in 15 years, because it showed the residents it is their home, and staff will do what it takes to make it work. Is my time up? Okay. All right, I'll stop there. So anything else additional whenever we do the breakout, I'd be happy to answer any questions then. Thank you.
Next is Marbridge, President of Marbridge, James Stacy, and Vice President of Operations, Scott McAvoy's here. And they're right outside of Austin, Texas, and it's a continuum of care model. And I'm just so happy that you guys are out here, because I just get to go to Austin every year, and I'm just so mesmerized by such a dynamic community that's been around for a long time, and they just make Austin so special. So, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is James Stacy, and I just wanted to speak a few minutes before Scott gets in our program a little bit about the history of Marbridge, because for two reasons. One is to encourage, in a group this big, there's got to be someone here that is thinking to themselves, you know, I've got to start a program, and to let you know that there's hope out there. And second of all, to let you know that our history is so ingrained in everything that we do that it's important that you know a little bit about what we do. You know, I listened to Krista that started her program out of desperation for her son Benjamin, and in Aaron's situation, Russell's desperation to try to find a place for Doug. I look back and cannot imagine. Marbridge was founded in 1953 by Ed and Marge Bridges, and they had a son, Jim Bridges, and they they had a desperate need in the late 40s and early 50s because there was just nothing available. There was not a group to go to this large. They might have gathered a group this big to tell Mr. Bridges they thought he was crazy, but the social mores at that time, there was really not a value for a human being that had an intellectual disability. And when Mr. and Miss Bridges talked about opening a place for their son, they did not have any support in that area by society or by the medical field as far as that goes too, because there just wasn't a lot of knowledge in that area about someone with an intellectual disability. So in 1953, Ed and Marge Bridges started Marbridge with Jim Bridges and 5 other young men. When I say our history is important, Mr. Bridges believed in the 40s and 50s that someone with an intellectual disability could learn, could experience, and could achieve. And today, we think the same thing. That really kind of takes my breath away when I think about that, of the courage that he had at that time and his view of the population that we serve. The other thing that Mr. Bridges, every decision that Mr. Bridges made was based on safety, well-being, and happiness. And today, we make our decisions based on those three things like Mr. and Miss Bridges did. In the early days, they started Marbridge on about 423 acres. It was south of Austin, and it was at that time in the country. We're not in the country anymore, but they did farming. They ran a cattle ranch. They had a pig farm. They had a dairy farm. And what Mr. Bridges thought that someone with an intellectual disability could learn was true. That they could experience life on a daily basis was also true. And they could achieve things. And every individual has a different level of achievement, but every day they achieve things at Marbridge in the early 50s. And so they learned to cook and to garden and to live and experience life. And I think that those are the foundations that Marbridge is 66 years old this year. And those are the same foundations and thinking that Mr. Bridges started in 1953 that we think today. And so, just like Krista had a mountain to climb with Benjamin and Russell had a mountain to climb with Doug, if you're here today, I hope that the experience of those that came before you and you're thinking about starting a program, that there are lots of folks that will help you. I know that Aaron spends a lot of time helping other folks. Krista is always open to helping other folks. And I know that our organization is always willing to help anybody with the program. So my thought is be encouraged by the history of others. They were able to accomplish it. If you're thinking about that, you've got lots of support. There are gatherings like this all over the country. This just isn't particular to California. Thanks, Jill, for bringing these folks together, but there's lots of support across the country, and there's lots of help. With that being said, I'll let Scott kind of talk about our organization. Thank you all.
I'm going to try to go kind of big picture, and then I know we have breakout sessions later. We're going to be here all day for questions. But where we are today is we have 200 acres. We have 3 communities. They're kind of predicated on one's independence. So the broad mission of Marbridge is to help a person with an intellectual disability be as independent as his abilities allow. So you look at the original community, it's in the middle of the 200 acres, it's the ranch community. The village community is our most independent, least restricted community on campus. We help folks graduate and move into the community on their own as well. We get folks living independently. And the goal is to only use paid supports when necessary. So we transition folks out of the on-campus community into the larger community with the paid supports and then diminishing them as they become acclimated to the places they're living, the places they're working, the places they're worshiping and playing. And they can access anything we do back on the mother campus. They can participate in Special Olympics and anything we have, all the facilities and whatnot. One thing that's unique about Marbridge is our villa. It's a skilled nursing facility specializing in adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities of all ages. So if you look at the campus and community, it's always been when Jim Bridges, the son of the founders, was aging in place, the Bridges are now thinking, what are we going to do when we're gone? Where's Jim going to go? And back then, they certainly didn't find any skilled nursing facilities that understood Jim. It was always like, oh my God, this guy's acting out, let's put him on some psychotropic meds. Not trying to get to know what their needs are and work with them. So they created in the 80s a skilled nursing facility that accommodated Jim and all the residents of Marbridge, and for that fact, the community around Greater Austin and across America with the skilled nursing and end-of-life care. So they lived on campus, their friends could visit and vice versa. So, like I said, the village is independent, semi-independent living experience. The ranch, assisted living. The folks living in the ranch don't go out into the larger community without staff with them. They do access it quite a bit. The village residents can go into the community without staff with them. As a matter of fact, most of them work out in the community. We have 27 employment partners. We've got folks going to school out in the community. We've got folks doing activities. The 2 assisted livings, the village and the ranch, what we do each day is they attend classes. We have a formal training and education program, have 18 full-time instructors, 151 different training opportunities on a weekly basis based on an individual person's goals and needs and wants. So each resident has a schedule with essentially 4 classes a day, 3 semesters a year with a 2-week break in between the semesters. The classes change as the residents' needs change. We have a couple of employment coordinators who help them access jobs in the community. Typically, residents take jobs on campus. We have 4 kitchens and cafeterias, 200 acres to landscape, laundry facility. We've got an equestrian program. We need people working in there. We've got housekeeping and that sort of thing. So we get them employed on the community, learn the soft skills of working, help them, how do you dress, how do you follow a schedule, what your attitude should look like, and then get them out in the community to a job that they really want. All the jobs are at least minimum wage. A lot of our residents in the community make quite a bit more than minimum wage. They become champions in the employers that they work with. Within our training and education program, we got beautiful facilities. Since James and I have been there, I think we've raised $25 million to replace aging buildings, replace campuses, we have a enrichment center with a sensorium attached to our skilled nursing facility. We've redone the skilled nursing facility, our dormitories, and we're replacing the building in the third from the left there is one of our new lodges. We're replacing our oldest dormitory on campus with kind of a family-like, home-like living environment. So each resident will have their own room within a suite, and they'll have their own set of peers in each building. So a little snapshot. We have residents from around the country, 31 states, 6 different countries. We serve a wide range of intellectual and developmental disabilities. We like to be disability blind, and what that means is we try to look at one's abilities, accommodate those needs of folks that have like autism. We know they like quiet environments. We try to accommodate that need. But we serve the whole gamut of intellectual and developmental disabilities. We are able to serve people of mild and moderate. We don't serve people profoundly at this point. We're an open campus. We're integrated with the community and vice versa. So what's a day in a life look like for a resident who lives at Marbridge? Everybody has a schedule, individual program plan. And on that schedule is the classes they attend, the work that they're doing. So one schedule might be someone in the morning works in the cafeteria after the breakfast hour, and then they go to a class, learn how to cook. Which is done multiple times a week. Then they might do a class in cardio, aerobics, go have a break for lunch, go back to the community and eat lunch, and then they might have a class in money management in the afternoon, and then end the day with a class in social skills. Classes are no more than 12 people per person. Each instructor is expertise or at a different particular subject. Some of the classrooms are essentially like a learning lab, computer lab. We have some, the classroom is actually a horticultural garden center and a greenhouse, equestrian program. We have some that occur on campus. Out in the community, we do bus training for the public bus, whatever they need to help them be independent. Have a ton of Special Olympic athletes, at least 100, and we go all over the state. We will bring 100 folks with a bunch of volunteers, paid staff, Special Olympic coaches. We'll go to Arlington, Texas for 4 days, and they'll participate in basketball, track and field, and bowling. Lots of outings, both planned outings, self-planned independent outings for residents that are independent and able to go off campus. We keep track of where they are. They have phones with them. We provide transportation as needed. Some of them use the public transit. We have tons of on-campus events as well throughout the course of the year. Some of the schedules are picture schedules for folks who don't read well. This is just a little snapshot of the village. There are 15 cottages, there's single occupancy rooms, and 3 2-bedroom suites, so 6 per cottage, has a kitchen in it, has a dining area and a living room. There's a campus cafeteria available for those who haven't learned how to cook. They can go down to the cafeteria. 24-hour wake staff on all parts of the property, full-time nurse on that campus. We have resident trainers, drivers, directors, assistant directors, supervision, training education opportunities for them, and employment opportunities both on and off campus. All the eligibility required, you've got to be at least 18, a primary diagnosis with an IDD, and independently able to perform ADLs. You might need help, support, you might need prompting. Activities of daily living. You're welcome. Part of our admission requirements, we can't accommodate folks with threatening or aggressive behaviors or significant psychiatric disorders that require 24-hour mental health care. In the 2 assisted livings, if you require 24-hour medical care, you can't be accommodated in assisted living, but in our skilled nursing, you can. Price is $36.25 a month. That's everything I just explained. So room and board, housing, 24-hour wait staff, all the training and education, transportation to activities, et cetera, all the amenities on campus. The ranch, same sort of setup, except the ranch folks need staff to go in the community with them. They do tons of activities. There's 24-hour wait staff there. They're access and training and education. It's the same tuition amount. The Villa skilled nursing, you got to have a medical condition which requires 24-hour skilled nursing care. The Villa serves both our residents on campus and the community. Attached to the village, the requirements at the Villa are you got to be 18, you need a physical assistance, ADLs, you have to have a medical condition requiring 24-hour medical care, and the requirements of pre-admission screening and resident, which is an assessment of intellectual and developmental disability. Accepts Medicaid at the Villa. At the two assisted livings, it's private tuition based. We have several residents who've been there 60 plus years who have run out of trust fund money and the families have gone. And we have benevolent care scholarships. We also absorb folks into operations that have been there. We're not going to tell anyone you can no longer live here because you can't afford to pay. We'll never do that. We've got a very generous donation base that assures that. The Bridges is attached to the Villa. It was actually Ed and Marge Bridges' houses until about 10 years ago we decided to convert it to a short-term rehab facility. So it's like a house. It's a 5-bed rehab facility. So folks come in there, whether they're in our community or out in the larger community, they spend like 100 days there, rehabbing from like a broken hip or a broken leg or a knee replacement. And then they're able to go back home with the rehab that we provided. We provide occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and because we have an equestrian program, hippotherapy. So folks are able to access that as well. And Medicare, private pay, or private insurance will fund that. We have a camp each summer from June to August. It's an overnight camp from Sunday afternoon through Friday afternoon. It's an 8-person camp, different set of staff. Camp's not about independent living skills training. It's more about having fun and a respite for folks. So they come and they stay the whole week. They access all the fun stuff on campus. They go out in the community, attend baseball games. They go to museums. They just have a great time. We additional funding sources for what we do. We have donations. We're trying to maximize use of our land through land leases to offset some of the revenue deficits. We're looking at additional land leasing and business enterprise zones on the front of our property. We're in a great part of the city that's growing and expanding, and we have some very valuable land that we can develop to offer jobs for residents and lease income for the foundation. Things that doesn't work. We try to accept folks that are beyond kind of our ability to take care of. So people require more supervision, one-to-one. We currently can't do that. And we tried to do that, but it doesn't work. Our license is for mild to moderate people affected. Every dorm-like environment we've had on campus, we're moving to a more home-like environment, more single occupancy rooms. I think Jim said it best. It reduces drama, gives person their own space, a little more privacy. They're able to access friends within the same cottage and then within the same community, and then we help them get into the larger community. We sometimes parents have a different idea of success for their loved ones than we see or do and evaluate. Sometimes it's an over-evaluation, sometimes it's an under-evaluation. We work very closely with families, and one of the biggest things that I see as success is when a loved one does far more than a family expected they could do, especially if they never thought they could work in the community and now they're working out at a hospital making $14 an hour. Competitive employees, in order for us to attain the best direct support professionals and the people taking care of residents, we have to offer a competitive wage. Austin is a high economic area. There's a lot of employment and very little unemployment, so attracting the best staff requires that we offer a great package, which we do. And longevity, we have a upward succession plan for every employee that comes to us. Future plans. We're looking at expanding the offerings. Like I said, we move people into their own apartments out in the community. Some families are kind of hesitant because they like the idea that someone is there on campus all the time working with a loved one who may be working in the community, but they have a place to go back to. So we're going to build apartments on campus. We're a community that doesn't accept HCBS. We've been talking to the state about that. And we live in a state that is number 50th in money per adult with IDD served. We have a waiting list in the HCBS waiver program of 100,000 people, and if you got on the list today, it takes you 15 years to get to the top. A lot of work done. We're wanting to be one of those programs that will do what we have to do to help reduce that waiting list. Currently, what we have to do is offer group homes in the community close by, but we're working. We want communities like Marbridge and other intentional communities to be a spectrum of choice for those folks. We're looking at ICFD, IDD, which we don't offer. We can do that on campus. In the state of Texas, like most places across the country, there's a limit on beds. You can't have any more beds. We can purchase them from available beds, though. Business enterprise zones, like I said before, offer restaurants that folks build on our campus. They give us lease revenue, job opportunities, and awareness, and so forth and so on. And that's it. Thank you all for your time.
Aren't we just grateful to be in California? We're in title state. So next up is Odile Carroll. She's here to talk about Camp Hill communities across America and also worldwide.
Hi, everyone. So if you didn't catch at the beginning, I am not actually Richard Neal. Do not live at Camp Hill, Copake, and I do not have certainly the list of credentials that he does and the years of experience. I came to Camp Hill as a family member. My uncle is a dual diagnosis of developmental disabilities and some mental health stuff. He had been my entire life in and out of, well, before my lifetime, had gone the institution route in the 60s and 70s, ended up in quite a few standard group homes, and then after a group home experience in Austin, my family stumbled across something called Camp Hill, which was in about 1999 or 2000, and he, also disclaimer, not my photos, this beautiful life at Copake that will be the background of this presentation. So my family stumbled across Camp Hill in Massachusetts kind of as a last resort, looking to something that they hadn't really researched that much at that point, but really needed to find a residential option for him. And he moved first to the Berkshires in Massachusetts, lived in a house there for a year, and then moved to Heartbeat Life Sharing, which is located in rural Vermont, about 30 minutes from Stowe, a little town called Hardwick. I started visiting him when I was 12 years old. He lived there for 6 years. And then subsequently, once I started high school, started spending summers there as a visitor, volunteer, kind of helping in whatever way was useful, cooking, cleaning, farm work, gardening, babysitting, the list goes on. Subsequently, after I graduated from college in 2015, I moved to Heartbeat to be a full-time short-term coworker there. I lived in a house. My uncle at this point had moved out and is living now in a group home about an hour from Heartbeat. So there's still a lot of visits that happen, which is we're really fortunate for that. But I started as a coworker, completed a year there as a short-term coworker, and then now I am a graduate student at the University of Davis in a community development program, and my thesis is on Camp Hill. It's using Heartbeat as my case study, so I do apologize. A lot of the way that I'm going to try and bring to life Camp Hill to you is more rooted in my experiences at Heartbeat. There are a couple people here from Camp Hill Communities, California, located in Santa Cruz, who will also be able to share a little bit more about another Camp Hill experience. So I'm just saying mine's rooted in the one that I lived in a little bit more. So Camp Hills are kind of one of their more unique elements is this concept of life sharing. So essentially, let me look at this. These communities, there are about 120 in the world across 22 countries. They were founded in Scotland by a German doctor fleeing with some of, he was a pediatrician who fled with some of his patients with intellectual and developmental disabilities to Scotland during World War II. Started this community for children originally. And now it has spread across 22 countries, and there are 16 Camp Hills and affiliates in North America. Camp Hills can and do take varying forms of residential care, but again, coming back to this idea of life sharing, that's something that's kind of a tenet of a lot of different communities in the U.S. What that looks like in everyday life is, so for example, the house that I lived in for a year is a constellation of, the time that I lived there, 3 short-term volunteers like me. The volunteers had been my year through AmeriCorps or through we have a lot of international volunteers that come as well, can stay at least a year, if not longer. And then, so 3 short-term volunteers, 4 residents, friends, villagers, names are thrown out. And then 2 long-term coworkers that are called householders. And those are usually, not always, usually, at least at Heartbeat, families with young or adolescent children. So in my household, there was a householding couple who had a child. They now have 3 children, but at that time there was just 1. So imagine having 3 children and managing a house. It's some pretty incredible people in these communities. So this Heartbeat, I would say, different than Copac, it's a younger community. It was founded about 20 years ago, also around the same time that Camp Hill Communities California was. Copac is either one of or the oldest Camp Hill in the United States. But essentially kind of going beyond, so with this idea of life sharing, you see Camp Hills in the idea of extended family households. The concept of rhythm in community is one of the most important aspects to our daily life. Together, not only do we all work in individual houses at Heartbeat, there are currently 5 of these houses, these constellations that I'm talking about, 5 houses in the community, and then 1 that's just down the road from the community. So not only are you all like living and working together just in your house in terms of maintaining the daily chores of cooking and cleaning and social time, there's a communal living room that everybody has pictures of their families and games that they like to play and activities, but you're also participating in kind of daily life in the community. The community is on a 140-acre biodynamic farm. About 60 of those acres are farmed with a lot of woods, and then there's a 2-acre vegetable garden. So outside of house commitments and work, everybody participates in a variety of practices throughout the day, either in caring for the land through estate work or farm work or working in the vegetable garden, or through a variety of craft workshops, studios. We have felting, we have paper making, we have sometimes individuals who come in from the community and host yoga, or we have chime choir, a variety of artistic workshops, which is also kind of considered a foundational component of this philosophy. What I find compelling about these communities is that everybody's help in all of these different spaces is necessary and valued and not hierarchical. So just in the sense that I came to Heartbeat and made a social agreement to join community life, every single other individual does as well. And so I think that there's a little bit of that when you think about the affect of Heartbeat or affect of Camp Hill. I think there's something in that, how do we all understand each other in how we work together rather than working for other people or having people work for us or provide service that is challenged a little bit. And so sometimes translating Camp Hill can be a little challenging, but I think worth the effort. So yeah, I would say beyond that, it's the daily rhythm of everyone waking up together, preparing or helping to prepare breakfast together, cleaning up, joining, gardening workshops, artistic workshops, coming together for lunch again, having a rest hour, having, variety of activities in the week. During one rest hour a week, we all have a house meeting, for example, where everybody participates if they want to, in coming together and expressing needs or points of, conflict they want to address, or, some event that they want to go to, or something that is kind of structured in the way that we're all on the same team, I would say, and all kind of participating in the creation of home together, meeting our own needs and everyone else's needs. Following that, afternoon workshops or afternoon studios take place usually in the community itself, but there are lots of opportunities for outings. There are also several people in the community who hold roles in jobs either in the local co-op. There's a local organic seed company that I went to, that I drove someone I lived with to every week, who actually, this organic seed company had at that point, they had some sort of trade with the Ben & Jerry's ice cream factory that was about 20 minutes away. So in exchange for seeds, Ben & Jerry's gave this company hundreds of pints of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and we got to take one home every week, which definitely made us the most popular people in the community on Thursday afternoons. But yeah, so those are just kind of small pictures of the community. There's a lot more to go into, both in terms of the funding process, waivers, and how that looks in different states with different communities. There's a breakout session. Happy to answer questions. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was kind of...
I asked Odile 24 hours ago to step in, so thank you so much for being available at the last minute. So does anyone have questions?
If you have questions, if you don't mind coming up to one of the microphones on this side.
Well, yes. Do you want to- For live streaming, that's very important. Yeah.
This question is really for all of you. Could you just quickly go down the panel and let us know what your wait list is? If we were interested in entering communities, how far out do we really need to be starting to look at this? Thank you.
Our wait list is long. Our first wait list, which is people ready to move in today, has about 22 people on it. And then we have another wait list, which is people that are just interested and haven't done the 1 week visit. The caveat I would say is that we found out this year, because we ended up having 4 people, including the gentleman who passed away, who moved out of the building. And the 4th person to move in to fill that spot was number 20 on our wait list, because a number of the people in front of him weren't ready at the time or had found something else. So it's not always a perfect, the way it works isn't always exactly fluid. So if you're interested at all in Casa de Amma, we'd be happy to talk more about it.
Our wait list is not so long. It's a movement to target. The village community has a wait list of 3 right now. The ranch community, we're opening new lodges. That's got a wait list of 8, but there's opportunities in our senior dorm, which is an assisted living agent in place. Skilled nursing facilities are quite a long wait list in that particular program, but there's opportunities there because the way that we reduce the wait list is by level of acuity and need. So talk to us, we'd be happy to help.
At the Arc Jacksonville Village, we probably have 130 to 150 on the list. However, we only do assessments when someone gets down to like number 20. So the rest of them, there's an interest. It's not a for sure sort of interest in moving in, or if they'll get through the assessment process. We only have about 5% turnover per year. Now, we've only been open 2 years, so it's a long wait list, I would say, for most folks.
So the number that was kind of thrown around at Heartbeat this summer when I was there doing my field work for my thesis was, well, Heartbeat's, at least for this community, it's different for every Camp Hill, but they view it as an application pool because it's not necessarily a wait list like first or last, but it's much more when there are opportunities open in the community thinking about fit, with the constellation of the houses being such an important dynamic in Camp Hill. So right now, I believe the number in the pool this summer was around 40 families, but I don't know what percentage of those had already come for a trial visit or had just expressed, a mild degree of interest.
We view it not as a wait list, but looking at the blend of people and who would be complementary within that blend. Having said that, there's several hundred in Michigan that are on that list. However, most of those folks are waiting to find out if they will be approved for Medicaid funding. For a family that might be able to explore private pay, that's a one-to-one conversation.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I would love to hear any thoughts that all of you have on striking that balance between independent living and what I might call co-housing, just from the pure cost and livability of sharing resources.
I'll start at this end. In the homes at Ben's Hope, we have 4 to 6 individuals in each home, and it is different when you're serving profoundly complex individuals. So independent living looks perhaps very different than some of the other models.
I think that kind of coming to community does involve a little bit of a phase shift into the fact that everybody is coming into community life. So the way that I think the way that there's dialogue around this that I've witnessed, at least this summer, is language and independence and autonomy and dignity and all of these terms that are incredibly important that everybody here and everybody in these communities are thinking about, but making sure how do you do that within a community and a life sharing model, still doing it, but then also kind of a little bit of a phase shift. I know that Heartbeat, at least from the state of Vermont, is it's the cheapest option of state care and really the best. So that's kind of an interesting thing when you think about funding.
In our property, it is all about independent living, so there really is no shared living other than if you're in a 2-bedroom. However, our agency has several community homes, which is an option, and those homes usually serve folks with more challenges. Could be folks that are aging, behavioral, a younger population, just more profound. So we try to sort of design our homes and services based on the individuals that live there.
When we talk about independent living, we're talking both on campus and off. It's all about safety, the capacity to be safe, how much supervision might you need in the community, how realistic is that? So we're trying to, like, we have an old house on campus, we've renovated it, and it's now an independent living house. So 2 residents live there currently with no staff on that site, but access, 2 staff. As I mentioned, there's a stopgap that we're creating for independent living, an apartment on our property, not on the main 40 acres, but across the street, where they can live independently, yet have access to services pretty immediately.
Yeah, and we're an apartment model, so there's not as much of the housing sharing, but I would say for Casa, the way we kind of look at it is, I think independence is a big buzzword these days, but from what I've seen, a lot of times independence means teaching someone to do everything on their own. We look at it a little bit more of interdependence, so if a resident wants to cook a meal and eat on their own, great, but the idea of kind of doing life together is critical to the Casa model.
Yes.
Good morning. I have a question for the whole panel, I guess with the exception of the 2 gentlemen from Texas, who I think have already answered it. And that is, I have an adult son who frankly does have aggression at times. Not always, but he does. And I would be lying if I said he didn't. So could you tell me, number one, how much of your population actually has autism? Because a lot of the photos seem to be of people with like Down syndrome more than, they don't look like my son, I guess is what I'm saying. And of those who do take people with autism, how many of you would take someone who has some aggression?
At Casa, about 30% of our residents are diagnosed with autism, and I think it would just depend. We've certainly had residents who have had aggressive tendencies and issues, but a lot of it is rather than on paper looking at it and saying yes or no, meeting the family, trying to find out the triggers. We've had residents that have had extremely problematic issues in other settings, but quite honestly, the setting created most of that.
Right.
That being said, we've also had people that have come and the problems hadn't stopped, and it was really affecting the community in a very negative way. So we always try to balance that out and just have honest, real conversations with the family without making quick decisions. So.
Mm-hmm.
At our village, we probably have 30 out of 121 that have autism, and it works best if they're in their own single apartment. Absolutely. We do serve individuals in group home settings too that have more severe degree of autism. And again, those are in community homes. Now, behaviorally, it really depends on how many supports are in place. If someone's on the waiver and they have sufficient supports to live independently without impacting others, then we welcome them. But they need to have the supports there to make them successful.
I can't speak for the number or diagnosis. I don't have that information for everybody, at least in the community, but I can say kind of personally that I don't think it's necessarily a binary of fit or not fit, depending on kind of higher or lower functioning, as I think there's quite a spectrum in this community, at least.
About 70% of our folks have an autism diagnosis, and quite a number of them have very complex behaviors. My son does. In the state of Michigan, we were required to be a licensed setting because of who we're serving, and the tough thing is licensing governs the milieu of a home. So they're looking specifically at, do behaviors of one individual adversely affect his housemates? And so that's where serving folks with high behaviors is challenging. Ideally, an individual setting is optimal that can be part of the community when that's possible. But it is difficult, and I don't want to sugarcoat that, to find settings that can support profoundly aggressive behaviors.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's going to be a session on that topic in the afternoon. So yes, next.
Hi. I'm wondering if any of you can share about your programs and how you work with incoming residents, and I'm thinking specifically of higher functioning autism residents that might come in with a real challenge with screen addiction, and what's happening with that, and how, are you working with those residents on your own, or are there programs that you help them?
I've got a thought on that one. So my son, Thomas the Tank Engine, was life when he was living at home. When he moved in Ben's Hope, we as his parents, not Ben's Hope, made the decision that screens were making life get smaller for him. And so as a result, we just didn't send a screen. Now, I'm not talking about individuals necessarily who are high functioning and rely on that for communication, but that was a very helpful thing for my son, just to make that not part of life when he moved. And thus, life is bigger.
All right, I think we're going to, for the interest of time, we're going to go to the next question.
Hi. What advice would you folks have for an intentional community that's just getting going with the current HCBS ruling environment that we're in? We're feeling kind of uncertain how to move forward, and just curious.
Yeah, we actually have a breakout session on HCBS this afternoon, so please come to that session. Yes.
Every state is different.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll first start with that. Extremely different. In Florida, we have 5 such communities as our village now. And the state continues to put out RFAs for even more. I think the big difference is they're not licensed. Yep. So there doesn't appear to be a big issue with CMS, and making sure people have total access to community and have the ability to make choices, etc. We just really haven't encountered any problem. Yeah. But that same scenario does not apply to every single state at all.
So at Together for Choice table, we actually have a HCBS info sheet that's actually provided by DDS, and we're going to have an afternoon session just on that focus. So we're going to accept one more question, and we're going to have a lunch breakout session as well, so come and find us.
I was wondering if you could quickly tell us how you vet for safety. How do you check the staff and residents to ensure that they're safe? And one other thing, I'm from Hawaii. If anybody is interested in starting a program in Hawaii, please connect with me during the breaks.
How do we vet for safety? Obviously, the most important thing that we can provide. Our staff go through a fairly intensive interviewing process and then 47 hours of training that's required by our county, and that gives us the opportunity to know them. Of course, background checks, checks with our former employers.
Well, thank you so much, speakers, for joining us here today, and we'll be available throughout the day.